Hey everyone, welcome to 30 Flirty and Nerdy. Today I have with me Juliana, and that is me, but also Juliana. We're
Yes.
named twins. So I'm really excited because we met online. I
hmm
think we met through a Facebook group, and you wanted to be on my other podcast. Is that how it happened? Is that how we met?
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, yeah, we're both part of the She Podcast Facebook page. And I remember you were asking for guests because your past podcast was What's That Podcast, where you were
Yes.
interviewing people who had podcasts to tell more about their podcast. And you had me and my friend Mel on, and we talked about our podcast then and now, Puffcast. And then you also had Jeff and I on from Into the Fold, and you just had Jeff on. So, listeners, if you are familiar with Julianna's past episodes, she just
hmm
had one of my best friends, Jeff, on, who is one of my partners in Pod, and he and I do Into the Fold. And so we're just kind of like very interconnected at this point, I feel like, which is fun
Yeah,
because we have the same name too, you know?
it is, and it's really fun because we connected on Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And Harry Potter is what we both grew up with and what we both love. And we're also Hufflepuffs in the
Uh-huh.
Harry Potter space, if anyone
Yeah.
is familiar with what a Hufflepuff is. And yeah, so Juliana, we met through She Podcasts, and we're podcasting friends and been friends for what, like about a year now? Like online friends
Yeah.
for a year now?
A little bit over a year, I would say, honestly. I feel like our episode with you, with me and Mel, was a little over a year ago, but I could be sorely mistaken,
Yeah,
honestly.
I saw recently that my podcast like aired October like of last year or 2 years
Hmm.
ago. So,
Okay. So
but
maybe it was almost exactly a year ago then.
I think so. But it's the thing about this podcast that I love way more than my previous one is not the previous one was amazing because I got to meet you and Jeff and Mel,
Hmm.
which are amazing. Again, like Jeff is part of a episode, and it was a fantastic episode. If you want to listen to that, I'll link that in the show notes. But it's this podcast is awesome because I get to learn more about people that I haven't learned about before. And the other one was talking about the podcast and why the podcast started and why you two
Hmm.
became friends. But now it's like I get to learn more about you and who you are. And that's what I really love about the show because you have such an interesting story that I feel like you could help other people that may be
Interesting is
going through
putting
the
it
same thing.
mildly.
Well, I feel like with your story, you could help other people that are going through the same thing that might not understand what is happening with them and
Yeah.
just kind of like being vulnerable and sharing what you're excited for about the future because you're 29, you're almost 30. And
Hmm.
so,
Getting old up there, you know.
yeah, well, you're going to join the 30 club and
Hmm.
it's going to be a really cool perspective because you're going to share with the listeners about your pretty much hopes and dreams of what your what you want your 30s to be like compared to what
Hmm.
it was like living in your 30s already, if that makes sense to people that are listening. Yeah, Juliana is amazing. I have her bio right here. It's pretty long, so I'm going to put it into the show notes, but you, like you said, you have two podcasts, Puffcast and Into the Fold. You produce a podcast yourself as well. You are also a registered dietitian for the VA.
Yep.
You walk your dog, you do podcasting, you talk about Harry Potter, you run marathons, which is super cool. We were just talking about how you're going to be a part of the New York Marathon coming
Hmm.
up. And also, too, what we're going to get into is that you have a chronic illness, and I am so sorry if I butcher this pronunciation, but I never heard of it before, and we're going to get a little bit more into it. But it's called alkalizing spondylosis, also known
Alk-
as spondy. Is that right?
yeah, so it's alkalizing spondylolysis.
I
And
can't
like,
even pronounce that.
yeah, people who identify as having this, we kind of abbreviate ourselves as spondies because there is like obviously a lot of letters and words in that. So,
Yeah,
and spondy's
it's
easier to
hard.
spell.
Yeah, spondy is fun to talk about too. So, yeah, I want to get into all of that with you and to kind of talk more about what it was like when you were diagnosed with that, what you've been going through, how you've been internally healing, like everything in that realm and how you're doing now and, your hopes and your dreams and your future goals and everything like that. So I am excited to get started.
Yes.
I'm excited to talk to you, to catch up with you. And yeah, you ready?
Yes, I think I'm ready. So, hello, 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 listeners. It's lovely to see you again. Hopefully, you've listened to Julianna's other podcast and you're here because you love her. So that's a good thing. And so, like the other Juliannas, this is so weird having two Juliannas because, like, as you know, Juliana, there's literally no one else who has our name. Like, it's
Yeah.
so weird. I remember one time on the playground, like this one time when I was like a small child, I heard someone else's dad yell like Julianne. I was like, it's me. And then I realized this person was not related to me who was
Yeah.
yelling my name. And I think I had two other people who I've really ever like fully interacted with besides you, Juliana Junguza and Juliana Santana. And just for reference, I'm Julianna Coughlin. I don't have a matching last name. Sorry.
Yeah. There is like another girl. The crazy thing too in high school is there's a girl named Juliana in my class and a girl
Mm-hmm.
named Jillian in my class. And I have a sister
Oh,
named Jillian.
oh, that's
So,
crazy.
and I sat next to them because our last names were peace. So
Oh,
it got
okay.
really confusing in classes and things like that because like one of the Juliana's names was like pronounced differently. Like back then my name was pronounced Juliana, but I kind of
Ah.
fixed it to Juliana because the spelling to like match with the spelling. So I totally get what you mean. Like it's so totally crazy because there's very few of us. And when we
Mm-hmm.
get together, we're like, hi,
Hello.
name twin.
Yay. Yay, 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 yay. Okay, so I think I'll probably start with a small little overview as to like where I stand in life as a human being, just because I that's going to play into everything else we're going to talk about. Because
Yeah.
I am someone who, as a kid and growing up, as most of us actually probably were privy to, was kind of tabooed away from talking about personal health issues and mental health issues and things like that. And up until like pretty recently, the last like 3 or 4 years, I just kind of felt like I was like weird or crazy or not okay. And something was like wrong with me, but it was just like I was just wrong. Like something was wrong with me. And it was like my fault in a way, just because people weren't talking about mental health as much as they are currently. And people weren't talking about their physical health as much as I hope people will start talking about in the future and going forward. But it's just I felt really isolated. I felt like there's something wrong with my body and my brain and I am the only one suffering from it. And I have kind of made it one of my life goals is to talk about all the things that I'm going through outwardly, like in a non-judgmental manner, and just make it so like, yeah, talking about mental health is just the same as talking about the weather. Like, yeah, you can walk up to someone who you're like, obviously you have some rapport with and be like, yeah, today I'm just like, my depression is really bad. And them to be like, that's okay. How can I help you? Or like I have ADHD, me like identifying things as I'm going throughout my day. I'm like, yep, that's me having ADHD. That's what it is. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. So I definitely am someone now who wants to just talk about like physical issues that I'm going through and mental health issues that I'm going through. So that way other people around me feel like they can talk about it too. Cause I've noticed a lot that if I talk about something that is like quote unquote taboo for the general public to like really anyone, and I saw this especially with like my dyslexia diagnosis. Like as soon as I got my full dyslexia diagnosis, which didn't happen until like 2 years ago, because I pursued it myself, I started telling like other people, I was like, yeah, I got my dyslexia diagnosis. And the number of people who came out of the woodwork to tell me specifically that they too had dyslexia or had knew someone with dyslexia or like had symptoms similar to what I had and were like now looking into getting a dyslexia diagnosis. I was like, yeah, like one person advocating for their own mental or physical health can really just spark other people to feel empowered to do the same thing. And I really, that's kind of where I want to stand in life, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It
Was that
does.
long enough of a rant?
No, that's perfect because you are 100% right about how back in the day, like people didn't talk about mental health and didn't talk about the
Mm-hmm.
issues that they were going through. And for me, like I totally get what you felt, how you felt like weird and off and something was wrong with you and you didn't know what
Mm-hmm.
was wrong with you and you felt like you were the weird one out of the whole group. Like I felt that too. Like this isn't about me today, but just
Ah,
to sympathize with you is like I was
yeah.
diagnosed with auditory processing disorder and I had no idea I had it until I
Mm-hmm.
was like a senior in high school. So I felt that I'm weird. There's something off with me. Like, I don't understand why I think the way that I think. And it's basically like dyslexia, but for hearing. So like
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, and our
And
school system
I
and the way
resonated.
the way that our society is set up isn't anyone who's any format of neurodiverse, which is actually a large portion of people. The society that we live in right now is not built to make it so it's easy or even like kind of easier for us to function day to day. Like the way that testing is set up is so not adaptable. The way that school learning is set up is so not adaptable for the most part. And it just sucks because as a kid, like you don't know what you're going through unless someone has like advocated for you and gotten you that diagnosis and like has started you on some kind of like learning plan or something. Because there are a lot of teachers I know growing up when I was a kid who were like nice people, but they were just like, yeah, if you fail this test, you fail this test, not realizing like, oh, okay, maybe she's just like not processing it easy enough. If we read the questions to her, it would be easy and she'd like I'd be able to give you all the information, or if you like give me an audiobook, I can process that information other, and if I read it, it's not going to stick. And it's just it's the format of how things are approached, and I'm really hoping going forward that things are a little bit more flexible when it comes to like learning with kids, and even like in the workplace too. As an adult, it makes it really challenging. I know I've run into, because my dyslexia is like spelling based dyslexia, like it's reading and spelling based, but it's like most of it lives in like the spelling category. And I've actually been fired from a job because of bad spelling.
Wait,
And that was
seriously?
Oh yeah. And that's why I went and got the formal dyslexia diagnosis, because I didn't have anything to like like any like paperwork to hand them to back it up. And so now when I go into a job, I bring that paperwork with me. I'm like, here it is. You can't fire me if I spelled something wrong in an email, because
Yeah.
I physically can't see that. I could stare at a word all day long that's misspelled. You can be like, Julianna, find the word that's misspelled in this sentence. I'll probably never find it. I'll be like, everything looks good. And they'll be like, no, something's wrong. I'll be like, I literally can't identify it. Like, I have no idea.
I want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Boudoir by Winter. Do you want to feel sexy, beautiful, confident, radiant, and empowered in your own skin? Winter helps with just that. She is a wonderful boudoir photographer and is offering my listeners 15% off a boudoir package if you mention me. No code necessary, just mention me. Feel free to message Winter over on Instagram at Boudoir by Winter. You may also check out her website, boudoirbywinter.com. Embrace your body, embrace your beauty. Thank you so much, Winter, for the sponsorship. Let's get back to the show.
This is really interesting because you're dyslexic. How did you read the Harry Potter books, and how did you read the Grishaverse books? Did you like do the audio version of the books, or did you like were you more into the movies? Because you're a big fan, and I know
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of times the books there's a lot of words and a lot of
Yeah.
pages, especially in Harry Potter. So I'm just thinking like, how did you manage to read all of that and comprehend all of it before like seeing the movies or anything like that? I know that's kind of like off topic in a
Yeah.
way, but
No,
I
it's a
feel
good
like,
question.
yeah,
Yeah,
I feel
I
like it
think
kind of correlates.
for me, I think it also helps because I have ADHD, and one of the functions of ADHD is you have like hyperfixations where you're like super into something. So these were things that I was like, one, like super motivated to consume, and two, I read really slow. Like I read like awfully, like god awful slow. And so I'll like read through it and I just read extremely slow, and sometimes I have to go back and reread sections. And luckily for me, the Grishaverse and the Harry Potter books are written at like a kids level reading comprehension. So it's nothing that is like super intense to read. I know like adult novels that I read, I have to take like a pretty long time, like processing through them. And it's a challenge for me to take the more complex information or really any information and like talk about it out loud. Sometimes it takes me maybe one or two read throughs to get to the point where I can be like, oh yeah, I like remember reading that. And it's not just me kind of like breaking down the syllables and like breaking down the words. Right now, I'm definitely like, as an adult, I'm at the point where I can like read a lot of things. but my reading comprehension of like the really complex things, like the sticking in my brain is not the best. But like things that are like right now I'm reading the Percy Jackson books, and those are like perfect reading comprehension level for me. We love them. They are like a middle school grade, and it's just easy. And I find my brain can just like kind of like whoosh through them, and it's just like a nice feeling. And it's kind of interesting because I am reading some other like adult books at the same time because I do really love reading. And like I definitely can feel the difference mentally between reading the adult books and reading the Percy Jackson books. And I didn't really fully realize that until like I started reading both types of books in tandem with each other. Just like how much more mental effort it takes for me to read a more complexly written book than it does to read like a mid-grade book, and like just how much like easier it is, like mind like stress wise. But like for Into the Fold and for Harry Potter, I do end up listening to the books for Into the Fold on audiobook because it's easier for me to comprehend and have that like reading comprehension that Geoff and I are trying to get into for the pod, and be able to like speak about it, because if I hear something I can process it way easier than if I can read something.
It's so interesting because we have the opposite we have like the opposite issues going on, and just hearing you talk about how hearing things helps you way more than seeing things. I'm like the complete opposite. Like I could read something and comprehend it like instantly, but for
Mm-hmm.
like audiobooks, like book audiobooks, it's harder for me to get into. So I
Oh,
really
okay.
appreciate like you explaining that to me,
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, how does that work for you? Because I'm trying to like comprehend it because it's literally opposite for
Yeah.
me, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, and that just plays into the fact that everyone's brains are so different. And that's something like I'm a dietitian by day, and I emphasize with all of my client and all of my veterans, all my patients, that if one diet style doesn't work for them, that's okay. We can find another way to approach things. And sometimes it's just in the phrasing that you're using. Or like some people like really like numbers and they love to count calories. And some people for them, they just can't do it. They can't deal with numbers. And so just like shapes and colors are like the way to go. And I just like to emphasize with them, and like really with anyone, that everyone's learning style is extremely different. And we just have to kind of figure out what works best for you, and then tailor that information or that task that's trying to be gotten, that you're trying to get done, to whatever your learning and doing style is. And yeah, it's just really unfortunate that most of the world isn't on that plane of operation, but it seems like we're moving a little bit closer to it. I feel like the more conversations we have about neurodiversity, the larger topic it becomes, and the more it's going to start permeating like bigger organizations like schools and things like that.
I really hope so. I really hope in like 5 years from now or sooner, schools
Mm-hmm.
really take into consideration the learning disabilities that you and I experience, and
Yeah.
other learning disabilities too that may not be as extreme as like I don't know, just as extreme as some kids might have, like with IPAs and things like that. Like
Yeah.
just something to help everyone in like
Yeah.
different formats would be amazing. Like if they could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it could even be the simplest thing of being like, do you want to take this test in an audio format or in a written format? Just giving kids
Yeah.
the choice of like either putting on a set of headphones and listening to the questions read to them, or reading them on the page, or doing the combination of the two. Because that's
Yeah.
something that, one, if you had like the headphone situation going on, you wouldn't interrupt ever anyone else in the room, and it would just make it. I know that would have like saved my butt so much when I was a kid.
Mm.
If I could have just
Yeah.
heard things instead of having to like physically read them on a page.
Also, too, it could block out all the extra noises of like paper like
Yeah.
rustling and
Well, some
people
kids need
like
that too.
doing
They need
stuff.
like a set of like earplugs or something, or so maybe
Yeah.
some kid needs music to pay attention. I know, like when I'm reading a book, I like to put on music behind me because of my ADHD, my brain is trying to do like five things at once. So, and that's
Yeah.
also why the audiobooks are helpful too, because I can like walk around and listen to an audiobook, and I know my brain processes way better when I'm like physically moving and consuming information at the same time. Like if you take me for a walk and you tell me something, I'm actually going to retain it. If you sit me at a table and tell me something, my brain is probably going to slowly shut off on you, because like my body is like, we're sitting here. It's time to disengage. Shutting down.
So
And
when
it's
we
like,
hang out in person, we go for walks. to talk instead of coffee shops.
Yeah. Unless I'm like really like
it.
I have to like as you'll notice, like I'm very like physically engaged in the way that I talk. And I think a lot of that is just me subconsciously knowing that like if I'm not physically doing something or like animated in the way that I'm talking, my brain will like actually actively disengage. And you can see it in my eyes sometimes when my brain is like, and I just like I go off to a second planet. And it's just, yeah, it's
Is
something
that
to
why?
what
I was gonna say, is that why you stand when you podcast?
Oh, well, that's part of my other issue. But yeah, it is something I this is mostly because I have the alkalizing spondylosis. So
That's
that's
actually,
the joint pain.
yeah, that's actually a really good segue into that because I don't know about it. I never heard the
Yeah.
name before. What was it like for you to find that diagnosis that you got, and what was that process like for you? How did you like learn about it? How did you like do research into it? What have you been doing to help yourself through this chronic illness that you never heard of before? Because that's to me is
Yeah.
mind blowing.
Yeah, it's kind of been a wild ride. And I feel like anyone who has any kind of chronic illness is going to really identify with anything that I'm going to say too, just because it's not uncommon for people to have like a really kind of traumatic entry into finding out that they have a chronic illness. For me, what happened is I took a really bad fall on my knee when I was running. I slammed it into some black ice and like really just got a really big bruise. It blew up. And it should have kind of just like stopped with the knee pain. But what ended up happening is over the course of like the next like 4 or 5 months, like I just had this pain in all of my joints that was not going away. And like my knee pain was bad from the fall, but like everything else was just like really hurting me. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I ended up taking like pain medications. I found out I was allergic to naproxen, which is Aleve, by ending up in the ER because I couldn't breathe. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been taking naproxen slowly more and more each day. And like the more I take it, the more I can't breathe. And
Oh my
from
God.
yeah, it was
That's
kind of
crazy.
wild. So then from that, the people in the ER, they couldn't really identify like the joint pain issue though. So they were like, yeah, you should go see a rheumatologist. And I was like, okay, I've never seen a rheumatologist before. And so I got really lucky. I have a rheumatologist, Dr. Rosazinski. We call him Dr. R. And I landed with him. And he is the one who took my blood work and he identified a marker in my blood, and I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's like the T something whatever marker. I'm trying to see if I can find the name of it. But essentially it's a marker in your blood that's like pretty characteristic for everyone that has alkalizing spondylosis. It doesn't guarantee that you have it, but if you have that plus a combination of other symptoms like joint pain that won't go away, or like stiffness in your back or in your muscles, and pain that will wake you up in the night, then it's probably you pretty much have it. You have it. Those are all the symptoms. And so I was having all these symptoms, plus I had this marker, and he was like, yeah, you have this. And for the first at least like 6 months, I was like, I don't have that. Like, this is just knee pain. It's going to go away. It's just going to go away. And so I was taking prednisone on and off a lot. And like anyone who's taken prednisone, it's not a fun time. I actually ended up getting skin anasarca, and anasarca is like a full body swelling, but it was like in my skin specifically.
Wait,
So
so your skin was swelling?
yeah, like there was water that was pooling in my skin, so my skin would like sag, and like it would physically hurt. Like I wake up in the morning and my skin would hurt because it had
Oh
been
my
like being
gosh.
pulled down by gravity. I'd walk around and like my skin touching my clothes was like painful.
I'm
So I
so
got the
sorry.
yeah, I mean that's because of the prednisone, so it's fine. But I had to figure out a way to manage the knee pain and the other pain without the prednisone because that was not going well. And so my doctor was like, yeah, let's try some medications called biologicals on you. And those are essentially medications that they kind of stop the disease process of anyone who has like arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis or anything like any format of arthritis or kind of inflammatory diseases like IBS, or well, not necessarily IBS, like IBD, or bowel disease, or Crohn's. Things like that are usually treated with these medications as well. They're like genetic diseases where your body kind of attacks itself. And that's essentially what happens with AS, is that like your body is kind of actively attacking some of the muscles and the bones in your body. The definition I have right here from the versusarthritis.org website says alkalizing spondylosis is a type of arthritis that mainly affects the back, causing inflammation of the spine. This may cause your back, rib cage, and neck to be stiff and painful. It's a response to the inflammation that the body produces extra calcium around the bones of the spine, and this can make extra bits of bone grow and cause your back and neck to be more stiff. So eventually what happens too is that your bones kind of fuse together. And I before I die, hopefully I live that long, I will get the privilege of becoming the hunchback of Notre Dame. Thank you very much, because my bones are destined to fuse together and like cause like a little like hunching thing. So what these medications do, the biologics, is they prevent that from happening, and they kind of turn off the little alarms that your body has turned on because there's something weird with your genetic like markers and makeup. And so it turns those little alarms off. And so the swelling and the inflammation and the pain, like pretty much will either get a lot less or it will go away, because you don't have those little ambulances like running around your body for a false alarm going wee 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 and just like making all your joints really inflamed and painful and everything. And so essentially it's been like a 2-year trudge to get to a point where I've tried like 3 biologicals. Right now I'm on Humira once a week. The fun thing about biologicals too is that you have to wait a full 3 months to figure out if they work or not. So you can only change biologicals every 3 months. So it's not like another medication where it's like, oh, it's not working, let's try another one next week. It's like, no, you have to wait the full 3 months to try another one. So it's a process. And so right now I'm taking Humira and I'm taking Flexeril, which is a muscle relaxer. And it's been a journey to, like I said, to get to the point where I kind of know what works for me. The fun thing about the biologicals too, from what I've heard, is that sometimes they just like stop working for you. So your body just like changes and it's like, oh, sorry, you got to change medications now. And then you got to go through the whole process again. So it's been a process getting to that point. Fighting with the insurance is an understatement. At certain points it's been like literally like a part-time job to get my medications and get them paid for, just because insurance doesn't like to pay for these medications, because each one of the shots that I take, because the biologicals are set up like the insulin pens that as people might be familiar with, and so you shoot yourself with a shot once a week, and they're like $3,000 a pen. Like I said, I take 4 of these a month.
Crazy.
Yeah. So insurance doesn't like to pay for them. So let's just say we've gotten into many fights with the insurance over this, but it's a process. And from everyone that I've talked to who has either this condition or some other kind of health, like chronic health condition, also pretty much like goes through the same thing. It's been really interesting for me just because I don't know if you're familiar, Julianna, with the Try Guys.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
very familiar with them.
Yeah. I feel like anyone our age, we know the Try Guys. They were on BuzzFeed and now they're doing their own thing.
Are you gonna bring up Zach?
Yeah. I was gonna bring up Zach because Zach actually has the exact same thing as me.
Real okay, so that's what he has.
Yeah,
okay.
he has. Yeah. So if anyone is familiar with the Try Guys and has like consumed any of their content over the last, like, I would say year or so, where Zach has been a lot more vocal about what's going on with him and his chronic health conditions, he actually has the exact same thing that I have. And it's actually been really interesting to see him go through like the same things as I have, because like I too have many like pain relief devices that I just kind of carry around. I'm kind of just like a walking pain relief like wagon. I have like my TENS machine, my ultrasound machine, my massage gun, like all these weird little things that I've just acquired that like help my muscle stiffness. And it was funny because I was listening to him on his podcast that they do, the tripod for the Try Guys this week, and he was talking about how every week he gets to call the insurance people and renew his medication or whatever and make sure he can pick it up at the pharmacy. I was like, yep, I feel that. Do
you feel that like hearing him go through the same stuff that you're going through helps you a lot internally kind of cope with it? Because I know like he's kind of like a quote unquote like internet celebrity.
Yeah,
so
he's
like
a bigger figure.
Yeah, so like the fact that he's going through the same thing that you're going through, do you find comfort in that it's like, okay, someone knows exactly what I'm going through, like I could hear their story, and like, is it helping you? Does that question make sense?
Oh yeah. No, I definitely think it's helping me. I definitely, like I said earlier, I'm someone who like wants other people to also advocate for themselves too. So I think it's really awesome that someone who has such a platform is like speaking out and saying, hey, like this is what's going on with me, just so other people know. Because I feel like it's really hard for people without a chronic illness to conceptualize what it's like living with a chronic illness, because people will be like, oh, I'm in pain. And like, just me as a human being, like I am constantly in pain, like just at a baseline. There's just like a level of pain that I'm just like used to. And like when I say I'm in pain, or like when someone who has a chronic illness says they're in pain, like they're probably really in pain, like a lot. Like not just like, oh, my ankle kind of hurts a little bit. It's like, no, they're probably, their whole body is probably like en fuego, because like we just kind of get used to like readjusting our baseline of pain to that. And also just like dealing with the pharmacies, dealing with medications, taking the medications. People are always like, I don't know how you give yourself a shot every week. I'm like, I just do it because doing the shot is way easier than being in pain for like multiple days and like not being able to use my muscles. Cause like when I am having a flare or I don't take my medication, my muscles will literally like stiffen up, and I get like halfway through the day and I'm exhausted because because my joints are pushing against like my muscle movements. It takes like twice the amount of energy to just like move my legs or move my arms. So I get like through halfway through the day and I'm like, I'm just exhausted because I'm expending twice the amount of energy that I would need to just like do basic functions. And it's challenging, and it makes things really frustrating as a human being.
Do you think maybe like, so in my head I'm thinking like, would yoga and cannabis help you think, with the pain? I know
Yeah.
that's such like a crazy question, but
Yeah.
in my head I'm like, well, I know yoga is really helpful with like the stretching and like the
Yeah.
movement, and then the cannabis could help you with relieving some of that pain, because I know a lot of people would take it just
Hmm.
like medicine, marijuana and things could help them calm down with what's going on inside. So I wonder if that
Yeah.
would help you if you ever tried those things.
Yeah. So I yoga is really helpful, and like any kind of physical movement with alkalizing spondylosis is like extremely helpful. And just quickly, some people like they ask me like, "Oh, how do you run marathons? Isn't it painful?" I'm like, actually, me standing still for longer, it's more painful because my joints will kind of like set in and like stop moving and like kind of like whoop, get themselves like stuck. And a lot of the time when I'm running, even if I'm like pretty far into like a long run or a marathon, like I'm still in less pain than I would be if I was just standing there for that amount of time.
That's
So
so interesting. So more movement helps you
yeah,
feel less pain.
yeah. And a lot of people find there are actually a lot of ultra runners out there who have this kind of spondylosis, and that's someone who usually runs like mostly on like mountains or trails, and it's a usually at least 50 miles at a time for like each trip that they go on. But these are people who do like kind of like slower but like still intense long durations of movement. And a lot of people find that if they keep their body moving, it's easier for us to function as human beings. And like the yoga is definitely like really helpful with that, because keeping your muscles like limber and keeping your joints stretched and keeping that flexibility as you can in your body is definitely helpful. The frustrating thing is that it doesn't make it go away. Like even if I'm having a flare, like I can do yoga and I feel like a little bit better, but that only like brings me to a certain point. And it just gets frustrating because like I hate being dependent on medications, but I am. And there's only so much that you can do for your body by yourself, and it gets to the point where you're like, oh shit, I have to take medications. And yeah, I do know a lot of people too who have chronic illnesses that use cannabis. Zach is one of them. My friend Mela also has a medical marijuana license. Unfortunately, I tried to pursue one, but because I work for the federal government, they can fire me if they find any of my blood work, so I can't
Even
actually
if it
take it.
helps you, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's just
That's
it's
so crazy to me.
yeah, it's funny to me because there are so many more side effects from like the actual legal medications that I can take as opposed to the cannabis. If I was to take medical marijuana, there are so many less side effects, but
Oh
because
my
it's not like,
God.
yeah, because for government employees of the federal government, it's not legal for you to have any cannabis in your system. If they do a blood test on you, um, then
But
you can like automatically get fired
that
pretty
just
much.
makes me so mad, because
Oh,
if it
trust me, I was
helps,
pissed too.
if it helps you feel better and like helps you do your job better, like wouldn't
Hmm.
they want that? I mean, it's a
Yeah,
completely different thing than just getting high. Like it's a
yeah,
plant that helps you feel better about your body and yourself and your joints and everything, that makes life easier for you, and they won't let you take that
yeah.
because
Well,
it's like,
it's because it's a,
that
yeah.
just, I'm sorry. That just made me so mad. I'm like, are you
Oh
kidding
no,
me?
I was pissed too. And it was funny because I had the HR lady on the phone because I had to figure out before, because my doctor was more than willing to write me a prescription for medical marijuana. Like there was no issue. And the thing is, you're right too. It comes like documented. It comes with a doctor note.
Yeah.
Like everything is like very like cut and dry. Like this is why she's taking it. This is what it is. This is the dosage. This is the doctor recommendations. So it's not like a mystery, and it's not like anyone's going behind anyone's back at all. It's all very much so laid out straight. But I was talking to the HR woman and she was like, yeah, I hate this too. She's like, I have no control over this. And if I find anything in your blood, I have to fire you. But she was also on the same train of like, yeah, we should just make it legal for government employees to be able to have like prescriptions at least for medical
Yeah.
marijuana. Again, because there are
Yeah.
way less side effects for that than there are, like, say, the Flexeril that I'm taking. The biologics, luckily, don't really have many side effects at all, which is awesome. We love that. But like the muscle relaxer that I'm taking has a good amount of side effects. And there are so, and like we talked about with the steroids, there are so many side effects to steroids. And I can pretty much guarantee you, because my body does not like steroids, that I would have a lesser reaction to medical marijuana than I did to steroids. But I can take as many steroids as I want and still go to work, but I can't take any kind of like medical marijuana.
And the crazy thing to me is that if you do take medical marijuana, you could probably lessen your dosages of steroids and other medicine that you have to take that could
Oh
probably
yeah.
be more cost effective towards you too.
Oh,
Instead of paying like
definitely.
$3,000 for the medicine, you could pay like, I don't know, 100, 200 for medical marijuana and be okay. Like it just blows my mind. Like I wish that the
Yeah.
government would at least allow their employees to
Yeah.
have like a medical marijuana card saying, this
Hmm.
is why I have this thing. It helps me perform my job better.
Oh yeah.
And even if like they could even do tests and things like that with you where it's like, let's see how well this actually does help her performance. And if they see
Yeah.
that you improve, then it's like, okay, she could take it. But they don't even consider
Yeah, they
any of
don't
that.
care.
And that just blows my mind and that makes
Hmm.
me so mad.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I
what
was
the
pissed.
fuck?
Yeah, it's frustrating
I'm
too,
so
like being,
sorry.
oh no, it's okay. It's frustrating to being the person who is going through it too, because like I said, like anyone who has a chronic illness, we know that we are constantly on the search for that cocktail of medications that's going to put us in that zone where we're like feeling either good to okay most of the time. And it's such a long, grueling process. And it, because our bodies are ever changing, it changes as we move along too. So what I'm on right now, like hit me up in a couple years, it might be different as to what my body is able to like function on or what I need or things like that. So it definitely, it's such a process getting to the right type of medication anyway. Like even if you're just cherry picking from all like legal medications, quote unquote, but then to throw in the like the insurance factor and then also the legality factor of certain things that are technically are legal, but just not, this caveat of it is not okay by the federal government. So it just makes a complex process even more complex and even more obnoxious. It's
Ugh,
really
I'm so
annoying.
sorry. Like that's so annoying. And I hope like in the future they find it in their hearts to allow you
Yeah, that
to
would be great.
experiment with more medical help, medicinal help in different forms and different ways and not get in trouble or fired from it, especially if you love your job and you want to keep your job.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
which is that made me so mad for you.
It's interesting
What
too
the
for me
hell?
being a dietitian for the VA, because as most people know, like veterans have a lot of like mental health challenges because they've been through a lot of
Yeah,
shit. Like they have a lot of trauma, rightly so. And so there actually is a fair number of veterans that I have that either one grow their own marijuana plants or two take medical marijuana because it helps them with a lot of like the PTSD, the stress, the
right.
anxiety, all those things. And it's just the number of people who have offered to give me medical to like sell me marijuana who are like my veterans because they grow it in their backyard or
So
something,
how is it that veterans can do that, but you can't? Well,
because they're not government employees.
they're not part of the government anymore. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, they're no longer
Ah,
government employees. They're past veterans. So they're
got it.
the majority of them are not working for the government anymore. So a lot of them are just like retired, or they've moved on to some other kind of civilian job that doesn't
Right.
involve like the army or the government. And so they can do it because they're not like actually like being paid by the government to do their job.
Got
They
it.
are a benefit of the healthcare system that the VA provides.
I'm so
So
sorry. Like
it's frustrating.
I just want to be able to like I don't know, fight the patriarchy, fight the government for
Yeah,
you. And it's like
it's awful.
it just blows my mind. So my next question I think for you is what do you hope for in the future with your diagnosis? What do you expect to happen? And how do you expect to feel better within your body and yourself and just kind of like work through it, I guess. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
what do
Mhm.
you hope for in the near future, upcoming future that you could do for your body and for advocating for yourself to make you not feel so much in pain?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to do is obviously be vocal about the fact that I have this condition and make it see so other people feel like they can talk about any other health conditions too. Because the biggest thing with advocacy for chronic illnesses is that a lot of them are what we call invisible chronic illnesses. So you look at me, you're like, oh, Julianna looks fine. But most of us who are suffering from chronic illnesses, we're very good at like masking the pain. Like if I'm having a bad day, you probably won't even hear me talk about it because I don't want people to tell me what I can't do. Because if I start saying like, oh, I'm in pain, people are like, oh, sit down, take a break. I'm like, no, I'm gonna be in pain whether I'm sitting or standing or whatever I'm doing. Like today is just a day of pain and I have there's no choice. Like I have to either just like do things or I can just like sit around, and either way I'm gonna be in pretty much the same level of pain. So a lot of us just we don't appear to be like having any kind of illness, and it just makes it hard because you go to a doctor even who's not familiar with the illness that you have and they're like, oh, you're fine, and they just kind of write you off, and a lot of that is like misogyny and yeah, sexism. So that's a fun time. But it just makes it harder to get the adaptations and attention that you need for certain things when it comes to just making yourself a more like functionable human. Again, kind of like with the neurodiversity thing, just making it so you can do your job like as your employer, whoever it is, asked you to do it, but you need some like adaptations. Like I have a standing desk at work too, because like if I sit for too long, I'm in so much pain. Like I almost physically cannot get up from the chair if I sit for too long because my muscles get like stuck in one position, and like I hurt a lot. So that kind of
That's good
sucks.
that you have a standing desk that you could switch your position as often as you need.
Yeah, and like some days I do need to sit down. Sometimes my muscles are hurting and they're tired and like I need a break, but then I need to stand back up. So it's just having that like ability. And like if I go for a walk at work when I don't have a veteran, people are like, oh yeah, Juliana's just going for a walk, because they all know that I have like my weird muscle like condition, and they're like, oh yeah, Juliana's just like she's shaking it out going for a walk. I'm like, yep, I'll be back. I just like my muscles hurt. I just got to do a few laps around the parking lot. I'll be right back. So just kind of like advocating for yourself. And I think like going forward, I want other people to feel like they can advocate for themselves too. And they're not alone in what they're dealing with. So I want that to be like something that I kind of carry forward with me going forward into my 30s. And then I think for myself, what I want to do is just like make the most of what my body can do right now. And that's kind of a combination of like listening to my body and being like, oh, okay, I have to take it a little bit easier on like we said, I'm a runner on like my running today, because like, okay, today's like a really bad pain day. And like, I don't want to end up with a worse injury or worse pain down the road. So today is a day where like maybe we ride the bike or like we run on the treadmill because it's less of impactful on my knees or something like that. And then just kind of more strategically making my way to my goals going forward, and in those goals like really doing things that like I really want to do, like traveling, because traveling for me is painful because of the sitting and like the waiting around and stuff. It's like sitting in a car for like like the other day when I was sitting in a car for like 4 hours, like it was kind of painful, but I was able to like figure out like, okay, like I know that if I lay down, I'm better. So my mom drove like half of it and I got to lay down for half it. So that was like a good way to manage that, and just figuring out ways to manage it. So that way I can get to the goals that I have, like traveling a lot more and also running marathons and things like that. And just proving to myself that I can do hard things, because that's like one of the things that I really like to do is to push myself and just feel like I can do things that are challenging and hard, and having that like sense of accomplishment of like I did that and I'm proud of myself. And I feel like that's where I want to go, and I want to make use of, because my body's only going to get worse from here. Like let's be real here. Again, turning into the hunchback of Notre Dame eventually. So my body probably is not going upwards from here. So I would like to utilize what I have now to the best of my abilities and like go run all the marathons that I want to run, like within reason. Again, like listening to my body and being like, okay, this is our goal. We're going to get to this goal, but maybe we have to make a few modifications that we wouldn't have made along the way now, like running a little bit slower today, or like, again, like taking the run inside, or knowing that I have to like massage for like an hour after when I'm done with something, because my body just like won't function correctly if I don't. And learning those things and also putting them into practice so that way I can get to those big goals that I do have.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is really inspiring and really awesome to hear that you still have all these goals and these dreams and you want to do it no matter what. You just are doing it in different ways and what works
Yeah.
best for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too.
Awesome.
It's because like just being part of like the marathon scene, there are so many stories of people who like you think of like a marathon runner, you think of this tiny little skinny tiny stick figure person, and the people who actually show up to the starting lines of marathons, they don't really look like that. There's so many people who like the 10 elite people do, but like everyone else who's showing up, it's like your grandmother. Like I know people who are in their 70s and 80s who run marathons, and
Wow.
I know people who are like a little bit older than I am who they've had like 5 kids and they also have had like breast cancer twice and they're out there running marathons.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, a lot of what marathons are people who have gone through something and want to just like have that self like satisfaction that they can do hard things. And there so there's a story behind anyone who's stepping up to the starting line of a marathon. Everyone has a story as to why they got there, and everyone's story is different, and each one is also really inspiring, I would say. So I'm someone who I announced the Cape Cod Marathon finish line, and I cried like a minimum of like 10 times this year. Like I just because I love these people. Like I had one guy who was like in his 80s who crossed the finish line with his grandkids because they joined him for like the last like
Oh,
portion of the mile. I had one woman who had just recovered from breast cancer and her mom was coming to see her run a marathon for the first time, and it was just like I cry so much at the end of marathons so bad,
it's
and I get so
understandable
excited,
though.
and I just yeah, it's
Yeah.
such an emotion because like you push yourself so hard to go those 26.2 miles, and just the mental strength, it's less physical than it is mental. Mentally keeping yourself in the game for that long is like really challenging, just like even if your body is hurting, which anyone who's run a marathon can tell you that they didn't feel any pain, they were lying to you, they didn't run a marathon, it's impossible. And so just like physically being in pain and mentally being like nope, we're fine, keep going, is like really challenging, especially like given all the other conditions that like you're dealing with at that point in time. And to have that mental strength to get to the end, like that is a strong person. I don't care who you are, I don't care how long you took to get there. If you get to the end of a marathon, like you are officially like a superhero in my book.
Hmm.
And I again, like time doesn't matter, age doesn't matter, sex, gender, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whoever you are, if you can do something that's like that level of challenging, and it might not be a marathon for some people, it might be something else that's like that level of challenging for them, like you're a superhero in my book because you pushed through a lot to get there.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that so much. That
That's why
is so
Julianna cries at the end of every single marathon.
it's like you're gonna have me start crying. Like I feel like a little bit of tears.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop myself from crying too much because I have makeup on today.
Me too.
I'm like, oh, you put on makeup, Juliana. Don't fully ruin it.
Just put your eyes fully down when you cry so that makeup
So it just
doesn't.
like drips.
Yeah, so it just drips and you don't get like your makeup ruined. So I believe my last question for you is you kind of answered it in a way with what you hope for yourself with your chronic illness in the future. But what do you hope what your life will look like in your 30s? Like what do you want it to look like? And I guess what advice would you give your future self about
Yeah.
being 30 that because you're 29 now. So
Hmm.
what advice would you give your future self about being 30? Because usually in the show, I ask people what they wish they knew before turning 30. So we're
Uh-huh.
kind of flipping it a little bit today. So I'm curious to know what your answer is.
Yeah. So my pretty much like I have like one big life goal right now, and that is to just be more to be myself. Like each day I want to get closer and closer to being like the truest form of Juliana. And I just in my 30s, I want to get closer to being that version of myself because I say sometimes it's your childhood that fucks you up. And so I've just kind of slowly uncovering the layers of like fuckery and stuff like that that has kind of diluted who I am as a person and rediscovering who I am and just really being myself. And what I want for my 30s is to just become because this is an ongoing journey that's only going to finish when I die. Like let's be real here. So I just want to become even closer and closer to like me. Like I want to be the purest form of Juliana. And like by pure, I don't mean like holy or godly. I mean like just like me. Like if that's like a whore that is just like living their best slut life on the side of the road, then maybe that's fine. Cool. If that's who I feel like I am, that's chill. I don't think that's me. Like I know myself too well. That's not me. But if that happened to be me, like, and I uncovered that, I'd be like, okay, fine. That's what it is. And I just want to feel like I'm myself at all times. And I don't want to feel like I'm putting on a facade for anyone. And I just want to just like authentically be myself. And I've kind of learned too that authenticity is something that people are really like drawn to. And the more I become myself, the more I kind of draw in other people. And the more other people around me seem to feel like empowered to be themselves. So I'm like, you know what? This is a public service. No, it's not that big. But I just want to be Juliana. That's what I want for my 30s. I want to be myself and I want to become even more and more and more of myself and uncover the little bits and pieces that still need to be uncovered, which I'm again only turning 30. So there's a lot of like bits and pieces left to be uncovered. Don't you worry.
That is so true. And
Yeah.
everyone is still uncovering themselves. And I find with this podcast that people do find themselves more in their 30s because they don't
Mm-hmm.
care what other people think about them anymore. And they're like, this is me. This is who I am. Enjoy me.
Yep.
Take me or leave me. I'm not changing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Like when I was 29, 28, like I was asked what I want my 30s to look like. And it's like, yeah, like the same as you. Like I want to uncover more myself. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
more of who I am. And I think you're doing that beautifully. Like you if no one follows Juliana on social media, it is the best because you have such like quirkiness to
Blunt.
you. Yeah, and it's just so funny. Like you have this pizza that you carry around with you, like this little
Oh
pizza
yeah, I have the pizza
figurine.
too.
Yeah, and like you don't care. It's kind of like what's that thing? Yeah, like you carry him
Is the
around
pizza
with
wizard.
you.
Yeah. I'm just the more I learn about myself, the more I learn that I'm just like a goofy, like an honest, but like really goofy, silly person. And
Yeah.
I don't, I don't want to like skirt away from talking about hard things. Like I said, I want people to talk about them more, but I want it to be less of a shameful thing and people being like, yeah, I have this disease and it's okay. I have hard times
Yeah.
and it's challenging, but in the end, I can make things work. And I just feel like I feel mostly myself when I'm allowed to be, when I like allow myself to just be like weird and quirky and goofy because the more I become myself, the more I realize like no one else talks like me. And I just have like weird Julietta-isms that I say, and I love
Yeah.
it. I think it's very fun. And I think I'm going to write a book of Julietta-isms, just at least just write them down on a sheet of paper, you know, maybe like
Right.
self-publish on like the Kindle so people can have like just like a weird list of phrases that they can utilize in their own life. So, I mean,
I
like,
think that's awesome.
Yeah, I have a few. One of the ones that I don't even know where I got it from. I say like in any capacity a lot. Like I'll just kind of round out things, so I'll be like in any capacity, moving on, or I'll just cut people
Yeah.
off with that, or like I'll end conversations with it, or I'll like move. It's a great transitional phase for literally just me. No one else says it.
It works.
Don't
It
know where it
works.
came from.
It works though.
Yeah. It's just and just like implementing things like into my language or finding little things that like I like to say to myself, like little life mantras. Like one of the ones that I made up is chuck it in the pocket bucket. That's what we tell ourselves when we're having anxiety about literally everything, and we chuck it in the pocket bucket and get
Chuck
moving
it in the
because
fucking bucket. That is
yeah,
beautiful. I love that. That could be like a sticker.
it's fun because it rhymes too. That came out of me
Yeah.
like one day I was like, because I have irritable bowel disease too, and I was just like I was having like GI issues and like they weren't going away, and I was like I really wanted to go for a run, and I was like, you know what? I know a route that has porta potties on it. I'm either gonna have these GI issues while I'm sitting here and like not doing anything, or I can have the same exact issue and like just go outside and do something I enjoy. And I was like, you know what? Chuck it in the pocket bucket. Let's go. Fuck it. And so we just like went outside. It was fine. I came back. I had to stop a few times, but like nothing tragic or anything happened. And like I knew my way around. So I'm just like, yeah, chuck it in the pocket bucket. Sometimes that's what you got to
Amazing.
do.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being vulnerable today with me, sharing your story, sharing your chronic illness and your goals with it, and how you hope to advocate for yourself and for others. And just, you're such a beautiful person. And I'm so happy that we met through the podcasting space and that we're friends. And
Yeah.
learning more about you today has been absolutely a gift. And thank you for coming on and just sharing who you are and being more yourself. And I'm so excited to see what 30s Julianna is going to bring you.
Yeah. No, I'm excited too. And thank you for having me on. It's lovely to know you too. You're a lovely human being as well. So right back at you.
Thank you. Thank you, name twin.
Yes, twins.
Yay. Alrighty. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hey friends, thank you for listening to today's episode. Please take a moment to follow and review this podcast so it could reach others. Also, if you leave a review, I'll be sharing your review in the next episode. Lastly, if you want to be part of this growing podcast to chat about your life, your profession, passions, or if you have advice that you wish you had at 30, please sign up at the link provided in the show notes. I would love to have you as a guest on the show. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.